a woman named Feli was in the hospital, being cared for by her husband Dante and their son Conrad. Later on, their youngest son Rolando arrived. Dante told him that their mother only had about 2 months left. Rolando said he wanted to take her to Manila for treatment, but their father said no, he didn't want her to go through more pain. Rolando broke down in tears, but the family knew they had to start accepting the truth, so that Feli could finally rest in peace. They all went back to their quiet home in the countryside. While on the road, Feli said she wanted to see the farm one last time, so they stopped and got out. Her final wish for her children was to help their father with the farm and to look after him. She also asked her eldest son Conrad not to leave the country, but to stay and help out instead. When they got home, Conrad's wife, Sol, welcomed them. Feli felt sad that she wouldn't be around to see Rolando graduate, since he was supposed to finish school the next year. That night at dinner, Dante brought up their money problems. They lost a lot when Conrad got tricked by someone pretending to be a recruiter. And to pay for the hospital bills, Dante had to pawn their rice mill. He asked his sons to help on the farm and to watch their spending. Despite everything, Dante said he had hired a nurse to look after their mother, which surprised everyone, especially since Sol could have done it. But Dante explained he wanted someone who was professionally trained to take care of Feli. Later, Sol told her husband they couldn't keep living off the small wage his father was giving him. Conrad said he couldn't ask for a raise, not with the rice mill already mortgaged. Sol then firmly told him not to get her pregnant, not while things were still this hard. Conrad said he would eventually inherit the farm, but Sol doubted it, especially since his father was still strong and in charge. The next morning, Dante told his sons to handle things at home since he was going to pick up the nurse. Rolando stayed with their mother, while Conrad helped out in the fields. Later on, Dante came back with the nurse, who stepped out of the car wearing bright red sandals. Her name was Alice. Sol was caught off guard by how pretty she was. Dante woke up Feli and introduced Alice as her new caregiver, saying she was the daughter of his late friend. Feli thanked her for coming, and Alice replied that she couldn't say no to her father's old friend. While Alice was checking Feli's blood pressure, the old woman asked if she had a boyfriend. When Alice said no, Feli smiled and said she'd be a good match for her son Rolando. Sol then told the boys about the new nurse, pointing out how strange it was that she wore red high heels. Rolando joked that maybe she had red undergarments to match, which made his brother laugh. When Dante showed up, Rolando asked if he could meet the pretty nurse, but Dante told him to stop fooling around and focus on his work in the rice mill. When the brothers came home, they were both stunned by how attractive their mother's nurse was, but they didn't get to talk to her for long because Dante had to drive her back. Later, Rolando asked his mother what she thought of the nurse. Feli said she was nice and kind. Conrad encouraged him to try courting her, and Feli agreed, saying they looked like a good match. But behind their backs, Dante was already in bed with Alice, sharing a night full of passion. Afterward, Dante said he was starting to regret hiring her to care for his wife. Alice reminded him that he was the one who paid for her schooling, and taking care of Feli was her way of returning the favor. Dante said that soon they wouldn't have to hide their relationship anymore. But Alice told him that until that day comes, they must be careful not to raise any suspicions. When Dante returned home, he had a heartfelt conversation with Feli. She told him that when she was gone, he should find a decent woman, someone their sons could look up to. Dante begged her not to talk like that, but Feli said it was just the truth of life. He sat beside her and held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, Dante tried to wake her up, but Feli had already passed away. The family soon brought her to her final resting place, and everyone, especially Rolando, was overcome with grief. When they got back home, Dante said that even though he felt heartbroken, he also felt relieved, because Feli didn't have to suffer anymore. Not long after, the family returned to their usual routines. One evening, when the brothers arrived home, they were surprised to see food already served on the table. They were even more shocked to learn that it was Alice who cooked it. Dante casually told his sons that from now on, their mother's nurse would be living with them. The brothers exchanged confused looks, slowly realizing that Alice was more than just a nurse, she was their father's woman. One night, Rolando and Alice crossed paths in the kitchen. They just stood there in silence. Rolando handed her a glass, then quickly rushed back to his room. Later, Alice told Dante that Rolando must not be interested in women, saying he seemed afraid of her. But Dante brushed it off, saying Rolando was just too attached to his mother. Dante was actually glad Alice didn't like boys her age, especially since both his sons were good-looking. Alice told him he was still the most attractive of all, and after teasing each other, they ended up in each other's arms again. The next morning, after Dante had left, Rolando sneaked into his father's room. He picked up Alice's undergarments and took a whiff, then played with his father's watches and held his gun. But when he heard Alice approaching, he hurried to return everything. Alice came in to get a towel and headed outside for a bath. She didn't lock the door, and while she was undressing and bathing, Rolando secretly peeked from afar, clearly enjoying what he saw. At breakfast, Conrad got upset because he didn't want scrambled eggs. Dante told him to eat it since Alice prepared the meal. Conrad left in annoyance, saying he'd just find food elsewhere. Later at the rice mill, Alice brought food for the brothers. Rolando was thankful, but Conrad frowned and told her to stop bringing them meals. When she walked away, Rolando asked why his brother was always upset with her. Conrad said he felt embarrassed. Everyone in the village was already talking about them. During dinner, Sol shared that she had landed a job as a saleslady, but Dante got angry after finding out it was at the same mall that wanted to buy their land. A while later, Conrad came home drunk. Dante scolded him for being rude to Alice earlier. Conrad snapped back, asking what kind of respect Rolando was talking about when their father moved in his mistress so soon after their mother's passing. Dante reminded them that the house was his, and they were free to leave if they had a problem with how he lived. The next morning, Dante smiled while watching Alice wash his car. Conrad saw this and was clearly annoyed. Rolando arrived too and glanced at Alice, but quickly looked away when he noticed his father watching from upstairs. Later, a businessman dropped by the rice mill and offered to buy sacks of rice at a very low price. Dante refused the deal, knowing he'd lose money. The man left his calling card in case he changed his mind. Meanwhile, at the town market, people were protesting because the mayor was selling land to build a mall. The brothers visited their mother's grave and brought flowers. There, Conrad told Rolando what he had discovered, that their father had been seeing Alice even while their mother was still alive. Angry and disappointed, they decided to come up with a plan to drive Alice out of their lives. Later that day, Rolando began flirting with Alice to lure her into making a mistake. But Alice became irritated and accidentally dropped a plate, which woke up Dante. Rolando said it was nothing serious, just an accident. Alice stayed quiet. That evening, while the brothers were drinking on the balcony, Alice overheard Rolando apologizing for ruining their plan. Conrad told him to stop being slow and to take action already. With money running low, Dante had to sell some of his things, his watches and one of his cars. He gave the bike keys to Conrad and told him to use that instead. Later, when Conrad arrived home and found Alice alone, he stared at her without hiding what he felt. Giving in to impulse, he suddenly made a bold move toward her. At first, Alice resisted, but eventually, she allowed herself to fall into temptation, and the two shared a heated encounter. Rolando arrived later and saw them stepping out of the bedroom. Furious, he charged at his brother. Conrad was able to hold him back and told him he should have acted sooner. He said he only did what they had planned in the first place. One evening, Sol went to the kitchen to prepare dinner when a drunk Dante suddenly walked in. He switched off the lights and grabbed her from behind. Luckily, Rolando arrived just in time and stopped him. Dante apologized, saying he had too much to drink. Rolando pleaded with Sol not to tell Conrad so things wouldn't get worse, and the troubled woman agreed. The next day, the mall owner returned and offered to buy Dante's land. Dante said he would only sell if they doubled the price. Because of this, the deal was put on hold. That night, Conrad spent another heated evening with his father's mistress. Meanwhile, Dante was out drinking with a friend when Rolando showed up and revealed what Alice and Conrad had been doing. Dante rushed home and caught the two in the act. A violent argument followed. In a moment of uncontrollable anger, Dante pulled out his gun and shot his own son in front of everyone. Sol, overwhelmed with grief and rage, grabbed a knife and stabbed Dante again and again, bringing the nightmare to a brutal end. With his father and brother now gone, the land and house were left under Rolando's name. He later met with the businessmen and sold the family's property. After the deal, he and Alice shared an intimate moment on the farmland. It was then revealed that everything had been part of their plan from the very beginning. Alice's affair with Dante was only the first step. She then drew Conrad in, knowing it would drive Dante to the edge. And when the time was right, she handed Sol the knife, knowing she would do the rest. Together, they had orchestrated the fall of the entire family just to claim the inheritance. After selling the land to the mall developers, Rolando bought an engagement ring and proposed to Alice. She accepted with joy, and they sealed it with a kiss. In the end, Rolando and Alice got everything they wanted, and together, they lived happily ever after.